Yeah, you're right. It says probably. Hopefully. There will be a couple that rush in at the very last minute. Probably one of my coworkers. really quiet. I'm like, no, you have the whole thing. Okay, perfect. Okay,
Hi.
actually,
John.
nice to meet you. I saw you in the emails. Welcome.
Thanks.
How are you, Paula? Very well, thanks. How about yourself? Hanging in there. We're staying healthy, which is that's all you can ask for right now. Okay. No problem. Yes, thanks. But we had that quick it was right before back to school. We all got sick right before, but then we luckily dodged it. Both my husband and I have been sick, but the kids have dodged the back to school germs. So that's good.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's what it was.
Yeah. Right. I've talked to more adults who've been sick this fall than their own kids. Like, I just feel like the adults have had although they may have been out and about, like it's been a very consistent bubble. And now all the germs are everywhere coming from school. And like most adults I know have been sick in the last few months because of all the back to school germs. We're not recording, right? Okay. I have a question. Did Linda? I realized the other day, Linda's not on the planning commission anymore. Yeah. Oh, okay. No. She stepped down. Yeah. Okay. Remember to use your outdoor voice tonight, Carly. Okay. Did I come off really quiet? Okay. I will do my best. So if you lean back in your chair, I will lean forward. Nope. Nope. Well, I'm so used to doing meetings on Zoom, so I have my headphones in and it has a mic, so I just talk normally. So, yeah. I don't think you really want to hear my mom voice. Or when I used to work at a school, it was my school voice. You could hear me yelling across the campus. Hmm. As far as I know, everybody is a team.
Hi. John Grant. Meet you.
I can't remember, were you here last time?
I was not.
You were not, okay. I didn't think I recognized you. Got the video, so it's right side now. Used to be reversed for some reason.
Back with the old paneling.
Hmm.
Back with the old wood paneling.
Oh, no, the video up there of last time the picture was turned around, you know, right to left, left to right for some reason. Yeah, I guess they redid this during the pandemic because this is all new.
Yes. Okay. Mhm.
That's the camera right
It's
up
good to
there.
know. No one told me. Good to know.
On your application.
Yeah.
big thumbs down. That would be seen. That's true.
It's just that spot.
Well, I mean. take a
Most of
look at
them.
me.
Yeah, I guess most of them.
Yeah, I think for quality.
Yeah, the good seat.
I was saying, can I lobby to always stay on this side? iPad with my notes and everything, and I just don't want people to think I'm sitting here like online shopping or anything. There's no Wi-Fi connected, so. Not the most recent, like a couple. Oh, okay.
I was at a state meeting a couple weekends ago, and my son was playing football that Saturday, so I was stuck in that meeting for all day that Saturday. And during the little lunch break, I popped on my son's football game, try to catch a little bit of it. Then they started, and that's when the end of the game was going on. I was like, oof.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yep. Quite a while.
Okay, I was just gonna say in like an introduction,
So it's been
like.
11 years.
Hi, I'm Cody.
Hi, John Grant.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
How are you?
doing? Super good. Yes. Oh, no.
I remember him saying in the email, yes, I'm.
Okay. All right, let's good evening. I call this planning commission meeting October 6, 2022 to order. Paula, may we please have the roll call?
Here.
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 All right, at least we got 4. Let's stand to do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next is the approval of the agenda. As long as everyone has reviewed the agenda, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda and a second?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
That has been approved and seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And the approval of the minutes from the August 11th meeting, as long as everyone has had a chance to review those, may I please have a motion to approve those minutes and a second, please?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second that because I think I was the only one here out of us 4. All in favor of approving the minutes from the August 11th, 2022 meeting, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now is the time for public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. And we don't have anyone in the audience and no one on Zoom, so I think we'll move on from this. And Paul, please stay on the record that Commissioner Masher is not present. No problem. Discussion item. Second review of land use and development ordinance text amendments to clarify regulations relating to residential density. Clarifications were requested by the Planning Commission in February 2022. I think me, Mark, Philip, and Carly were all here for this. The Planning Department has had an opportunity to make some adjustments, and I'll let Josh go ahead and describe those adjustments. There's a lot of numbers going on. So no pictures.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. There are a lot of numbers, so I'll try to break it down easy for you. Thank you. Good evening, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. I'd like to welcome Commissioner John Grant to the team. Commissioner Grant has been in the city of the Dalles for over 10 years. He's a youth football coach, and he's now volunteering his time with the Planning Commission, so we appreciate that. Glad to have him aboard. Commissioner Grant and I met yesterday. We kind of went through a crash course of Planning Commission, state planning goals. I gave him a whole bunch of information. Hopefully we can quiz him by the end of the meeting. And we discussed a little bit of the topic today, just kind of familiarize himself with it. He wasn't here in July 7th meeting, but I also sent him over some of the document, our meeting materials. So hopefully kind of get you up to speed there, but by all means, ask away questions, any clarifications you need throughout the night, just kind of keep you up to speed on it. I am going to share my screen here real quick. All right. So a rundown again, this is a recap from our July 7th meeting. At that meeting is when we had our first reading of these code amendments. So density is an integral part of land use planning. It's mandatory to ensure responsible development within the urban growth boundary. The ability to expand an urban growth boundary relies heavily on a municipality monitoring growth and capacity, most commonly with prescribed density ranges. The Dallas Municipal Code references two separate density standards, one of them being the comprehensive density ranges, which have been in the code since the code was adopted in '98. And then in 2011, this minimum density standard was added to the code. Neither of these were consistently enforced until about 2020, when everything really came to head with the city denying an application because it exceeded density, but it still met minimum lot sizes that you all discussed in February. It ended up coming to Planning Commission because the applicant appealed the decision. Ultimately, that meeting ended with the Planning Commission directing staff to take a look at density and how we can fix it. And it's kind of where we're at today. And just a couple staff report corrections. My apologies. I was using too much copy and paste or cut and paste. So a couple things here you'll see on pages 2 and 3, toward the end of page 2 and the beginning of page 3. What's in red is what the changes that need to be made. You're probably at home trying to figure out how I came up with the numbers I came up with using these factors here. And it's because everything was wrong. So the quick correction there for option 1, basically an acre should be divided by the maximum density. And then option 2 is taking out, I had the word gross in there. We are going to propose that that's removed. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. So a timeline of these density code amendments. As mentioned, February, we were directed by you to take a look at density in our code. And July 7th, we had our first discussion on density. August 11th, per the direction of the Planning Commission, we distributed those amendments to local contractors, surveyors, engineers requesting comment. Unfortunately, we only received one comment, and that was emailed to you today. Rather supportive of these changes. And then tonight is our second reading. And really what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on the changes that staff is proposing to those previous July amendments. So this is a rundown of really what we touched on at the July 7th meeting. We talked about, definitions that are being proposed, talking about calculating density, rounding, using truncation to move our decimals, the density denominator, net area, regulating density between ADUs and duplexes, how they're going to be treated with density, with these density standards, minimum lot allowances, gross versus net densities, and redevelopment plans. So these will all be basically remaining the same, but we're just kind of clarifying on some more tonight. So tonight, the changes that staff's made from July to October to today, there are some additional definitions being added. We originally talked about removing gross entirely, but as you'll see later on that we're going to incorporate gross. So therefore we refined the definitions of each. I'm not really going to touch on those definitions. So I'm going to really touch on the next two bullet points, density range and lot sizes, and then gross and net density. So really what we're going to talk about tonight are major modifications that staff is proposing to those July 7th proposed amendments. And the 2 points are increasing the density ranges consistent with minimum lot sizes. That's one topic. The other topic is applying gross density calculations for maximum density and net density calculations for minimum density. I'll get into more of these in a little bit. The first one to take a look at is in regards to density ranges and lot sizes. Currently, our density ranges and our lot sizes are not evenly dividable into each other. Just looking at these numbers, it's probably, like I said, just glazed over. It's probably just some numbers for you, but underlined here, you have the density range in each zone, and then beside it in the italics is the minimum lot size. Well, by saying that they're not evenly dividable, this is a great example of that. So an individual may assume, seeing that we have a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, that they could take a 15,000 square foot lot and get 3 dwelling units out of it. Simple 15,000 by 5,000. That's not the case then when you apply the density to it. So in the density, this shows the density calculation. Really, it rounds to 2.06. So you can really only get 2 dwellings. So it's a little counterintuitive to have the two of them conflicting with each other. In past conversations, with that appeal that we discussed last February, we were also reaching out to a consultant that we typically work with, and their recommendation was to get these two things lined up. So how are we going to get them lined up? And we really took a stab at that with these most recent proposals here. And I'm going to outline 2 options here to address this discrepancy. So the first option would be adjusting the minimum lot sizes per the density range. So here's a reminder again of what the density ranges are. So in doing option 1, you would basically take an acre of land, 43,560 square feet. You'd divide it by 6 units because that's the max that you can have. And that would end up with 7,260. And as you can see on the right-hand side, our current minimum lot size is 5,000. So this would really be like a 45% increase to the size of a lot. So this would be one way that you could equalize the two. And the RM and the RH zone are there just for reference. There's an asterisk next to them, but we actually have different minimum lot sizes in those zones, and it's really dependent on the building type or how many buildings you're putting on a lot. So I just used the smallest that you could. So that's the 2,000 and the 1,500 there.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Clarify? So if we went with this option, we would have to increase the minimum lot size from 5,000 square feet to 7,260.
Yep.
So it would not help us. Ultimately, overall, our objective is to increase density. Correct? Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And
Just wanted to clarify.
Exactly. Yep. And I'll touch on it here in about a slide or two. I'll kind of show you the two different options. So this would be the other option, and it is adjusting the density range per the minimum lot size. So there's your minimum lot sizes for each. So this, you would be taking that acre of land and dividing it by the 5,000, and it gives you a bunch of decimal points. Typically codes and ranges are really clean and they don't use decimal points. So this is probably something that, maybe looks a little different than what we currently have. But that's showing the ranges on the side. So each of these, as you see, there would be an increase in the density range in each residential zone. So in looking at the two,
Another question.
Yeah.
So could you go back once?
Yep.
So, what? I think what I was thinking does make sense, but I'll blurt it out anyway. So if we couldn't, that 8712 number, it wouldn't really affect anything to just round that down. Because then again, we end up with a maximum density that is not a clean number, and that's ultimately what we need, correct? We can't adjust that number.
Well, yeah, this approach is just strictly by the numbers. Yeah. So it's
okay.
something
All right.
that, of course, you're never going to build 8.7 units, but this is basically saying that is what, just looking at the numbers, it would be. And then good question. And looking at the two options here. The first option, it's less overall density because we're increasing the density in every zone. It would place new restrictions on all residentially zoned properties. That means something called a ballot measure 56 would be sent out to every single residentially zoned property. It's not unheard of. We've done it before. But it's contrary to recent housing code amendments. I mean, this group worked really hard in the past couple of years to go through some code amendments to decrease the size in a lot of them. So this would kind of be doing the opposite. On option two, you would have more overall density and really more flexibility on those residentially zoned lots. And in looking at them, staff does not recommend option one and recommends option two. Then option two laid out here, again, this would be what is occurring. We are taking, increasing all of them, units per gross acre. This is, I'll get onto that more. Gross acre, that may need to be removed. I need to double check exactly how it reads, but I'll get into more of that. So then we also added in this provision for rounding, and this one I just added the entire text to explain it. Hopefully the language isn't too wordy and confusing, but basically what this is saying is, since we already established in our last meeting the importance and the need to round numbers, we want to continue using those rounded numbers all the way through and be consistent with it. But the caveat would be, we would not be rounding any of these density range numbers. We want those to stay intact. All rounding would occur at the development stage. So any rounded whole number which results in a total number of dwelling units that exceeds the comprehensive plan density range shall be permitted no more than one dwelling unit greater than the density range. So therefore, if you have a development that comes out to be 8.65 in a low density zone, we would allow you to round up to 9. Therefore, you would exceed the 8.7.
Another question. What if it was 8.1?
8.1 would go down to 8.
Oh, so just regular old round.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what we kind of chatted about the last time, is that 8.5 is going to be our cutoff. So when you look at these,
and 8.5 rounds up.
it rounds up. Yep.
8.49 rounds down.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And then looking at these, and it's a great point. Looking at these, so if you have low density or you're in the medium density, you would allow, those, any number, you would be rounding up to a 9 or to 22. But the high density, it would be 29 ultimately. Yeah.
Could we go back to that slide really quick? So my question would be for the verbiage, if that's going to be in the verbiage, if you're exceeding one more unit. So say we have an 8.71. If they say they do 9.71 and then want to round up to 10, is there any way for that verbiage in that to have that adjusted higher than that 9?
No.
I mean, as far as like your interpretation, but as if somebody was reading that, that would could possibly leave an open door for somebody to try to add an extra unit.
Hey, great point. And we can, I'm more than happy. Well, I'm going to be running all this language by our city attorney. He kind of cleans everything up for everybody. So, that's what we'll do. And we'll make sure that it's very clear that you really can only go up to one whole number. The one whole
Coming up
number of,
to-
yeah, exactly. So really, in looking at these, it could come down that you could get 9 units in the low density and 22 units in the medium density, but you couldn't do 10 or 23. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Would this also, the number of units per acre, would this also include accessory dwellings?
It would not. So the accessory dwellings section, I'd have to go to it. It's been a couple months, but let me pull that up here real quick.
It's on page 24 of our packet.
Thank you. Oh, so that's the definition. So there's allowances for duplexes. So with duplexes and ADUs, when you're for minimum density in ADU, for the purposes of calculating minimum density, an ADU is counted as one dwelling unit. But when you're calculating for maximum density, the ADU is 0 units. So basically the ADU allows you to meet a density requirement, like a minimum density requirement. But if if you're already maxed out on the property, you can still add an ADU and it's not going to go against your density.
Well, theoretically, on the medium density, which is 21.78, you could, including the accessory units, you could theoretically have 43 units.
23? Yep. Yeah. So you could use the provision to round up to 22, a full dwelling units at 22, and then you could have an ADU.
For each.
For each, basically, yeah. Yeah. In a scenario like this, yeah, the only way you would be able to do that though is if you divide lots and you're creating like 22 lots and then you have an ADU. This wouldn't work in the sense of a non-divided piece of land. Yeah. But the 22 that you would be allowed, it could be for 22 units of an apartment on a non-divided piece of land. But
But it's unlikely that you actually could divide that acre into 22 units, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll touch on that too here in just a few.
I think
Yeah.
there is a safeguard there, Mark, against that.
So jumping ahead, so that was one. I guess we can stay on it. Is there any additional questions? Because these are two big changes. So we can go to the next one. We can always ask more questions at the end too. So this next major modification, this is the idea that applying the gross density calculations for maximum density and net density calculations for minimum density. So looking at the two definitions, these aren't verbatim or anything, but this gives you the general idea of what the definition of each is. And I'm just going to go through like I did last time, showing you the examples of gross density compared to net density. This is gross. It's the property, basically the property lines. This lot, eventually, there's a right of way that would run right through the back portion of it. That area would be dedicated to the city for a future right of way. So therefore, the blue area would be your net density. And then in looking at a sloped property, this is your entire property. However, we would say that the constrained land, the land that is, I think it's 25% slope or more, this provides an example that area in the back would be would essentially not be buildable. So therefore, it wouldn't be included in your net density area. Another example here would be in a floodplain or a stream corridor, the same situation. That area is removed and your net density is the area in blue. So in the July 7th amendment, staff proposed removing gross entirely from the code, replacing it with net density. So at that meeting, there was a question by, the commission raised, how could this impact density overall? And it, could this impact, ultimately reduce using net could reduce the overall density of a lot. And then additional conversations after that, we actually had a proposal come through for a subdivision. We've only discussed it at site team, but in that, just having hypothetical conversations with the surveyor at the time, looking at it in a gross density lens compared to a net density lens, because this subdivision required a street system to go through it, all that street land was removed. So therefore they lost the ability to divide and create 2 more lots. So really it was a prime example that only using net density, it really, it will impact the amount of lots or dwellings that you can create. So these amendments, staff, and I, got to give a shout out to our associate planner, Caitlin Cook. She, after all the brainstorming, she kind of came up with this idea of what about using both, and kind of batted it around and came up with this idea that you would use net density for your minimum and gross density for your maximum. A couple pictures coming up here, hopefully will show. So this is the net density. It looks like I don't have my, okay. So this is the net density area. So this proposed code amendment, when determining minimum required density of an individual development, net density is used for calculations. So that means that only the buildable area is considered in your calculation. All constrained land results in less required dwellings. Because ultimately, when we're looking at density ranges, these are numbers that need to be met. So therefore, you take out the sloped area and you don't have to include it in your calculation. This gives an individual the ability to minimize density on their parcel. So it is not, sometimes, a lot of times, there's developers or property owners that don't want to build a lot of buildings on their property. So this gives them the opportunity to take those calculations away and reduce the amount of required dwellings that they may have to provide. And then in looking at gross density, this is the other proposed amendment we have. And when determining maximum allowed density of an individual development, gross density is used. Therefore, constrained land may still be used in their overall calculation. And it gives the person the ability to maximize their density. So a person may buy this parcel and they're told, hey, the gross is, let's say the gross is 4, but the net is 2. Well, if that developer's creative, they're going to pull everything to the front and they're going to have the ability to still build 4 units, but they would be outside of the constrained area. So this is still allowing them to build as many as can fit on this lot without being constrained by, having that automatic reduction from the constrained land. So really what it is we feel that it's by allowing the 2, it's really creates more flexibility overall for how developers, a developer or a property owner wants to have their land, really. So next steps. Yeah.
So that could create a scenario, if we're looking at this specific one, where somebody with a lot with some restrictions, topography or whatever, really gets to, like in this example, really gets to kind of cram in twice the number of residences that the next lot that doesn't have those restrictions would have, right? Twice the residences on the net area.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's like 4 and 2, yeah. If it's completely divided in half, correct. Yeah. But of course, that individual still has to meet building
Everything else.
heights,
Yeah.
setbacks,
Yeah.
lot sizes, everything that goes into it. So,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things too that you have to look at. And it's, by saying buildable land, one way to look at buildable land, quote unquote, is how much money you want to put into it.
Right.
Just because there's a 25% slope on a piece of property does not mean it's not buildable.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing very expensive foundations going in nowadays in the gorge.
Absolutely.
So this really gives that an individual, the opportunity, if they want to fork out a ton of money to put a foundation in that would support all these units, then this gives them the opportunity to do that instead of the city and the code strictly saying you cannot do that.
Yeah. And from a real estate perspective, it kind of equalizes the value of land across, which I think is a really interesting idea to do that. So in spite of some challenges, I think it's a really smart idea. Great job, Caitlin.
So then next steps would be taking into account, addressing any changes that the commission may want to address with these most recent changes. If there's no changes, we would proceed with the formal land use application. Ballot Measure 56, we would need to double check and see if one's required. As I mentioned earlier, a Ballot Measure 56, when you're restricting property, is when you would send out a Measure 56. It's very daunting language that the state requires. It says this may or may not impact the value of your property. But in looking at this and creating this flexibility of using gross and net, I have a pretty good feeling that we wouldn't have to send out a Ballot Measure 56 because it's not, it's less restriction and more flexibility really. But we will confirm that if one's needed, we will send one out. Notices will be sent to DLCD and Wasco County Planning. And then there will be 2 future legislative public hearings. So we're going to regurgitate all of this in front of you all again. And you would, at the next meeting, when we adopt it, you would basically be looking at the code that's in front of you that we're proposing, and you would be recommending an approval, hopefully, to the city council, and we move it to the next step. So in looking at, an anticipated adoption timeline here, my hope is that we could get this in front of you November 17th for the actual adoption. That adoption meeting will go through everything. We'll basically cram everything from this meeting and the July 7th meeting together, and we'll give you one clean presentation. There's some notices in here, mostly for us, but then it would be, I'm very hopeful of December 12th, but it's an extremely quick turnaround for us. It would mean that the night after the 17th, we would have to get a notice in the newspaper. So it's, it's very optimistic, but in the event we can't meet that one, we could get it on the January 10th city council meeting. Therefore, we would be looking at the amendments taking effect sometime in January, February 2023. And looking at it today, I noticed that is 1 year. It would be 1 year from the time we had that appeal where you directed us to take a look at it. So I know, pat on our back, we've had some kind of crazy turnover of staffing. So I'm stoked if we can get this by then. I think it's a pretty good turnaround for you. So with that, I am more than happy to answer any questions. We can dig into any of these slides, anything else that you want to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to first start by saying thank you with the context you set, because I feel like when we first started having this conversation, the context was not there about why density was being enforced. I can understand now why it was being enforced. But my question to you is, when let's say this all moves forward and we take it to city council, what pushback could you anticipate there being from city council? Because we are potentially asking, although there's already movement towards more density, this is direct with some really, I wouldn't say aggressive, but it's just the way it looks a little bit more aggressive than our previous language. So I'm just curious what, if you anticipate any feedback from the city council.
Yeah, I think the gross net aspect of it, not so much. I think most of what we presented at the last meeting in July, not so much, but you hit it on the head. That first one, increasing or perceived increase in the density. As I mentioned earlier, that it's been kind of, enforcing density has been spotty for the past 10 years. And a lot of times in that period of time, people were strictly, there's many applications approved just looking at minimum lot size. So if you take that minimum lot size, and it's been a standard and what many of our local surveyors are used to, just looking at that minimum lot size, I mean, it wouldn't be really that much of a change in how that process was being handled, because ultimately they could come to us and they could have a 15, in the past, maybe there was a 15,000 square foot lot that was divided into 3. So for there, it's that, that example is kind of meeting what we're looking to change. But yeah, it's an increase in density. So it will, I see some pushback. So we'll definitely have to provide some context into it. But really, yeah, it's just a matter of which way we want to go. And we're just trying to get past any future confusion. And that's, the tough one. And but you're totally right. I could see that just the numbered increase could result in a little bit of a sticker shock.
We aren't, the way I see it, we aren't really increasing density. Like this allows for the density that we all anticipated. We just were forced by the code to incorporate a formula that wouldn't allow us to achieve that. So now we've changed the formula that allows us to achieve the density that we all essentially voted on over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well,
Right.
over a year ago, you were really just looking at lot sizes. When we did the housing code
Right.
amendments, we didn't even touch on density, and that probably should have been touched on.
Right. And I think that
time.
was our, that was probably maybe our planning commission, just ignorance and naivete, to not know that those are two different things. Because I think in our minds, we're like, okay, smaller lot sizes is increased density, but it's not.
Mhm.
And that's not to say it wasn't conveyed to us appropriately. I think that there was just a lot of stuff going on. I don't think that we knew the difference. But
Yeah.
that was our intention, to increase density.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that any of these updates are changing that, but I think the clarity of the language, the perception could be
Sure.
that it's increasing
Yeah.
density.
I agree with that.
Plus, I think, I think we're all in agreement and have a shared objective to increase density, but I know that there are people, and I don't know if that includes anybody in city council or not, who don't necessarily agree with that stipulation.
Correct.
And I think the development out on Thompson and 10th and that was a really good demonstration of that. So, of course, there's always the not in my backyard, but there's also more general pushback on the idea of increasing density in spite of the fact of very restrictive urban boundary lines and all of that. So I think that's where I would anticipate pushback in, well, do we really, in our quaint small town of the Dalles, how committed are we really to increasing density?
Yeah, you're
But
right.
that's
Yeah.
all assumptions.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, I think there is some reluctance to increase density. So it's sounding, the planning commission really has been on board for increasing density for a while in so many ways, and the many different changes that you've made over the past few years. But yeah, it's like I said, it could be something that a sticker shock. So
I think the way of the presentation of density versus the option to develop on a person's land, how they see, having more options, a little bit more freedom, would really be a little bit more intriguing to the city council.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're right. The options, I mean, giving people the option, giving people the flexibility on what to do instead of just having this strict, very strict, kind of confusing at times way of going about it. The other thing I think that allows for the options is something we discussed at our previous meeting, and that's the redevelopment plan. That's the opportunity for an individual to not meet that minimum density build out necessarily, but be able to achieve that minimum density through submitting the redevelopment plan. So yeah, I mean, we feel that this is really we kind of threw the kitchen sink at the wall or whatever that metaphor is there. And we feel that this is creates some flexibility for not only, the developers, but also the just property owner that may just want to build one house. So
Just also wanted to say another objective we've had is, making sure that the code is clear and objective. And I just want to applaud you guys because as I was reading through this, especially the part about the ADUs and the duplexes and how those are counted, it was really clear. Like, I think that someone who may not have a ton of experience could go in and read it and really understand, with some support, what they're getting themselves into. So I just want to applaud you guys on how much more clear the language is and which is what we asked you to do. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
The only problem I have here is using gross for some of it and net for others. I think it just really makes it confusing. I think it should be consistent all the way through, whichever way you want to go. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in density, but if everything was based on net, it might be a little easier to figure out what you could put on an existing lot. But if I would go with gross density, that's fine too. But having the two variations, I think, just kind of makes it confusing.
It is. I mean, that is a good point. It is a good point, but I think in looking at net only, I think, we kind of touched on the issues that were raised with just looking at net only, where ultimately you're going to reduce your density because you can't build on some of this constrained land. Currently the code reads gross. Currently our
You could just leave it
plan.
at gross if that would give them a little more flexibility.
Well, the difficult thing that we found with just having it on gross is currently we do have a section in our code, redevelopment plans. We require when someone is developing land to already submit a redevelopment plan. We are just proposing to refine that scope. But basically, by using gross density, how we currently have it, when someone is dividing a piece of land, they need to submit a redevelopment plan or a shadow plat. They would then need to show, for the case we've found most of our issues along 9th Street with this. 9th Street over on the east side is rather steep. Because of that, an individual comes to us, they have 1 acre of land and half that acre is hanging off of a cliff. Well, our code still requires that they show us how they can, they submit a hypothetical plan, how they can pack all these buildings into that area just to meet a minimum requirement. And we've found a lot of pushback on it and some confusion and frustration. And that's another reason why we decided, to go with the net. But I mean, we can also look into it again if you'd like.
So it basically you have the option to use the net or gross for the minimum and the maximum.
Yep. Net will be for the minimum and then the gross would be for the max. Yeah. Cause that's it. I think it really just kind of sums it up. And then one of them is minimizing your density and the other is maximum. I mean, maximizing it, it's really, what's your flavor, what's your style? It's, however you want to develop your property. And this gives you the opportunity to do that, so, the net by using the constraints, I guess, using the constraints and the subtraction, the reductions of those constraints to your benefit by saying, well, I really only have to provide this many units compared to a developer that comes in and says, well, I have a sloped lot. I'm just going to move everything to the front. And I'm still, instead of them in a way being penalized for having a slope on their property.
So I just want to go back to this optics PR thing that you're bringing up. Instead of, and this is a public meeting, so it's not like it's not like a scheming plan or anything. It's not secret. Instead of just saying increased density ranges consistent with minimum lot size, you should just say adjust.
Yeah.
Like anytime there's the word increase, just say adjust. Because in my opinion, by definition, we are increasing density, but we are not increasing the perceived density that we all thought we were getting when we made these changes back in 2021. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's great. And I think I mean,
anyone can go back
started
and look at
to-
this, watch this meeting and say they're just changing the words around, but still.
I mean, you're totally right. And I think when I started putting it together, was using adjust a lot. And then I think, when I finalized it, I was like, I'm increasing it. So that's I think that's what happened. But as far as the code amendments themselves, the word adjust and increase aren't even in those. So
Okay.
It's really just for the staff report, but thank you for that. I mean, it's a great comment.
So what do you need from us if we're going to choose option 1 or option 2?
Not so much that, just really looking at what's been proposed and if there's any additional changes you like to see in any sections of the code that's being proposed, we'll just jot those down. But if everything looks fine, we should be able to just move on to our next meeting. We'll move into the adoption process. This discussion gives us the opportunity to really hash all of this out. So next meeting, when we go through the adoption, like I said, it's going to be, you've all seen it before, so it'd probably be a pretty quick meeting. But this just gives us the opportunity to kind of hash it all out now, and then we can take it through. So really no action. The only action would just be if you want to see any changes.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would just maybe get your blessing to move forward, really.
Yeah, I do like option 2. So I bless your blessing of option 2.
Okay.
And I, for one, do so. And then I think in regards to what Mark said, I get the consistency with gross and net acre. However, I agree with the gross acre and net acre, the using both of them. But, and this could just be me and my brain, if there was like a table that said, when calculating density, you do it like this, and like a table, like not
Okay.
words, but
Okay.
a picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
totally.
when, accounting for minimum lot size, you do it this way because then it's net.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
just like, because that does get confusing.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. So
Yeah.
Yeah. We can, that's great. We're hoping to have some more graphics as well. I don't know if they'll be, in the code, but we could take a look at maybe some graphics. We're going to try to get a couple examples of redevelopment plans finished up, at least by the time we go to the city council adoption.
Mhm.
I want to get a redevelopment plan that is basically, we're going to be working with a local draftsperson on this, to put one together for us that is the bare minimum, something that we will take. So an individual An individual can take this basic idea and be able to apply it to their property instead of maybe spending thousands of dollars to hire somebody to put a plan together for them. We want to get a basic plan on what they need to include. We're going to get it priced out at the clerk's office to see how much the recording fee is and be able to provide that information to people as well. But yeah, we'll just distribute those sample redevelopment plans to people. Anytime someone comes into the office or emails us, we'll just send it over to them, gives them that example. So.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm a big fan of tables.
All right. Noted.
Oh, God, I gotta have them. Yeah.
Well, cool.
Does anyone else have anything?
Oh, good work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on from that discussion item then. Item 8. Thank you. That's all really great stuff. I'm glad. And yeah, 1 year is super fast. So I hope that we can meet that January deadline. That'd be awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes.
So is the consensus to move forward with option 2?
The consensus, I believe, is to move forward with option 2, correct? As recommended by staff.
Well, I think as a clarification to it, it would really be the consensus would be moving forward with this entire proposed amendment. Option 2 is just, I laid out options 1 and 2 to show you how we got to where we are. Option 2 is embedded into these proposed amendments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
it's basically, thank you though, Paula. It's basically the consensus would be whether or not you'd like us to move forward to the adoption process of these amendments.
Okay, so the adjustments made in red throughout the packet is option 2.
Yep.
Okay, I apologize for not.
Yep. No, it's all good.
So yes, we encourage you to move forward as written.
Great.
Staff comments or project updates?
Yeah, I guess this caught me off guard. I forgot that was on the agenda. Yeah, so we are currently we have a position out. We're going to be interviewing soon for a new planning tech in our office. So that position is going to help alleviate some of the work that we have currently. I wouldn't say piling up, but almost. But this person will come in. It'll be our go-to person for building permits, ministerial applications of sign permits, things like that. So that's exciting. We'll be having some interviews next week. Project wise, yeah, this one's, we're excited to see this one moving through to the end. And it's, I think it's been a rather, that 1 year has been a rather quick turnaround for us, I think. But, I think there's more to come. We have additional we're making notes on additional code amendments that need to be handled here and there. Other than that, yeah, there's some big projects that are coming down the pipeline. We still haven't received anything as far as moving to the next step for that building regarding the height increase that you discussed in August. It's still with the architect and their team figuring out how exactly they'll be presenting the next step for their site plan review. Other than that, yeah, I think it's just we're just cruising along. I'll provide you some.
And so the planning department is still 1 or 2 positions short of just a few months ago, no?
Yes. So we are, we were 5 back as in May, we dropped to 4, and then July we dropped to 3, but we did have 5. Yeah. So it's just the 3 of us right now.
Are those open positions that are being actively filled, or?
There is, yes, the city is hiring for a community development director as we speak. So I think that closes next week. So we will know who's going to be sitting in this seat, hopefully sooner than later. So that will round it out. And there's actually,
Are you able to give an update on that in terms of applicants or anything like that? Or is that out of your purview?
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't, just for the fact that I don't know. It's handled by our human resources office, and obviously with me sitting in the seat right now,
Sure.
they're not going to share who's applying for it. So
Have you applied for it?
no comment on that one.
Okay.
So
Fine.
Yeah, break. Yeah, you did.
but no comment.
For you.
Yeah, otherwise we're Monday at City Council. They're going to be discussing actually the restructuring of the Community Development Department. So that's something that the new city manager has been it's kind of in his pet project since he got here, really. And it's great idea. It's really going to be kind of widening the umbrella of the Community Development
Wow.
Department. So
That's exciting.
yeah, it really is. Over the years, the urban renewal manager has also been the community development director. So we're excited that we're going to be creating a position, an economic development officer who will oversee and handle.
Within the planning department.
Within the planning
Oh.
department. So they'll basically, within the community development department, we'll
Mhm.
say. So there'll still be planners, and then there will be the economic development aspect, and they will take on the urban renewal agency.
Oh,
So
that's smart. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, tune in. There'll be more information. City
So
manager.
does that ultimately mean that the what was the last organization you just mentioned? The
Urban renewal.
urban renewal will be integrated or closer to planning?
Well, currently, they're integrated. They're integrated now. I mean, it's really just it's going
But
to
it's
be
different
more.
people, different meetings.
Well, there's that. Yes. So they have the agency board is managed by the community development director. And then the community development director also oversees planning. But what this is going to do, this is going to allow the director to still oversee all planning, economic development operations, urban renewal operations, but we'll have somebody in staff that's specifically assigned to urban renewal. So yeah.
So the plan department is expanding.
Yep, it is. Yep. So
And the director is the only position that is being filled right now, or is there another open position?
yeah, the other is the planning tech right
Oh, I
now,
see.
which we have the interviews next
Yeah.
week. So yeah, we're hopeful. Hopefully we can get seats filled by the end of the year. So yeah, exciting changes. The restructuring is really there's been a lot of thought that's gone into it. So it's it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Great things coming.
Nice.
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay. Do we have any commissioner comments or questions? No? Welcome, John. Glad you're here. Yeah. Okay. All right, gang. We're going to adjourn then. Thank you so much. And next meeting will be, when's the next meeting? Do you already have one scheduled?
Oh yeah, thank you. So the
Sorry, false alarm.
October 20th meeting will be canceled.
Okay.
And then the October 20th will be canceled. And then November 3rd, I believe, will be our next meeting. November 3rd, we for sure have at least one item on the docket, and that is for an RV park.
Oh, we've looked at that one.
This is another one.
Almost.
Yeah,
Oh, it's another
almost.
one.
Yeah, this is another one in relatively same area. This is a 25 space RV park. Yeah, different configuration altogether.
Down by the rodeo?
This
Rodeo
one,
area?
no, this one is over Heritage Loop area, the
okay.
old Heritage Church property, actually.
Got it. Cool.
So, yeah, and then there might be two additional on that. And then, November 17th, we're shooting for coming back in front of you for the code amendments for this density. So
Okay.
Groovy.
Cool.
All right. November 3rd, everyone. Meeting adjourned.